The May 24, 2010 meeting of the Public Safety Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Antelli? Here. Mr. Beebe? Here. Mrs. Draw? Here. Mr. Eckel? Here. Chairman Hanna?
Here.
Mr. Lee is excused. Mr. Lightfoot is excused. Mr. McCann? Here. Mr. Yolovich? Here.
Is there anyone signed up this evening for the public forum?
We have two public forum speakers signed up this evening. The first will be Alan Eiselhard.
Okay, she's speaking for Alan.
Okay. And the next speaker is Suzanne Albright. Please come forward. You're welcome.
It is impossible to promise a safe offshore industrial wind farm in Lake Ontario, as this has never before been attempted. We've all heard about safety issues related to the health of birds, fish, and humans. The disturbing data is vast and demonstrates little or no regard for the environment, all just for the selfish purposes of a few. So let's look at the data. Information already reported regarding serious accidents from wind turbines. Information from CWIF, the reporting agency I'm citing, is covered in the handout I've passed around. Blade failure, fire, and collapse are the three biggest problems listed in order of occurrence. Blade failure results in either pieces of or whole blades being thrown from a turbine, so far up to 433 feet on land, but who knows how far these massive metal weapons will soar in a nor'easter on the lake with wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour pounding our shoreline. Fire. To date, no one has been able to fight a 40-story turbine fire on land. Try it at sea in 6-foot waves or an ice storm. Tower collapse is self-explanatory, and in the past 2.5 years, there's been a sharp rise in these worldwide, and that's also in the data I sent around, including one in New York. Of course, there are other dangers like ice throw, and these are reviewed in the handout. So fast forward 10 years from now, our Great Lake, now an offshore industrial junkyard, home to crumbled, rusted piles of 40-story wind turbines. They're oozing their 214 gallons of toxic fluid, including oil, hydraulic, and transmission fluid, turning our lake into a watery wasteland. If this is such a safe, environmentally friendly industry, why is Mr. Kessel not courting for a site in his own backyard, the Long Island Sound? Only a no vote by Monroe County will send a clear message to Mr. Kessel that we're wise to his schemes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Albright.
Thank you. This concludes the public forum.
Is there anyone present who's not signed up to speak who would like to address the committee this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of minutes. You have the April 26, 2010 minutes before you. They'll stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any change by the end of the day. Next item on the agenda is a presentation by Mr. Paul Johnson, the Associate Planner of the Planning and Development Department. He will give a brief overview of the 2011-2016 Capital Improvement Program as it pertains to the Public Safety Committee. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Everyone should have a copy of the County Executive's proposed 2011-2016 Capital Improvement Program. I want to briefly describe the process that we used to put this together and then highlight two sections of the program that will be of interest to the Public Safety Committee. We begin this process in September when we asked departments to prepare projects for consideration in this Capital Improvement Program. This year, we asked departments to reduce their funding from all sources by 20%, so we established a target level. Two purposes for that were, one, to obviously reduce the total amount of our capital program, but also to try to reduce the spikes that we have experienced in some previous years where uneven funding levels occur over that 6-year period. I'm pleased to announce that we did achieve a 24% reduction actually over the 6-year program from last year's program from all funding sources, and we flattened out and tried to stabilize the funding in each of the 6 years. This program is developed internally by a committee of representatives from a number of departments headed by the Deputy County Executive, and they include the Budget Office, Finance, planning and development, engineering, transportation, and law. The county executive has submitted her preliminary program to the Monroe County Planning Board as required under the county charter. They have reviewed it. They held 3 public information meetings in early March to get public input on this program, and they submitted their recommendations to the county executive at the end of March. And now the executive in turn has submitted it to the county legislature for your consideration. Under the charter, you're required to hold a public hearing. Hopefully you will schedule that at your June meeting and conduct the hearing and adopt this program in July. This is a plan. There are no funding approvals associated with the legislature's action. The first opportunity for funding capital projects will come when the capital budget, which is the 2011 year of projects, is submitted to you as part of the 2011 operating budget later this year. There are 2 sections I'd like to briefly describe to you and highlight some of the changes. The first would be the sheriff's program, which you'll find on page 69 of the document. There have been some changes to this 6-year program from last year's. There's one new project, the Sheriff's Hostage Recovery Team vehicle replacement. That's a 100% state-funded project to replace that vehicle. We have a couple of rescheduled projects. The Court Bureau Base Station and exterior camera replacement project has actually been advanced 2 years from 2014 to 2012. The Marine Unit Office project has been moved out 1 year from 2011 to 2012. And a project that was in last year's program that you won't see because it's been moved out was scheduled for 2014 last year, but it's now been moved out of this 6-year program is the Sheriff's Firearm and Equipment Replacement Project. The second program category would be public safety services, which you'd find on page 73. There is one project for this program area, the Public Safety Training Center capital improvements. If you were to compare this with last year's program and project list, you would see a number of projects that do not appear. That's largely because of 2 actions. One, the creation of the Development Corporation to handle the majority of public safety capital projects, and also an amendment to the capital improvement program that this legislature adopted in April of this year, which advanced the Public Safety Integrated Management Information System, which had been scheduled for 2011 and 2012 at $4 million in each of those years. So those projects are no longer in the capital improvement program. And that is a brief summary, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to answer questions either now or when you get to this item on your agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Are there any questions for Mr. Johnson at this point? Seeing none, we will move on. Next item on the agenda is new business. Madam Clerk.
Referral 10-152, adopt the
Moved by-
2011.
Moved by Legislator Draw, seconded by Legislator McCann. Is there any discussion? Legislator Eckel.
Chairman, I guess I will ask the questions now. You mentioned earlier that the, through the chair, let's start with that. You mentioned earlier that the Sheriff's firearm and equipment replacement scheduled for 2014 has been moved out of the CIP. Why doesn't it? Why has it been moved out of the CIP? And what happened to the project?
Through the chair, the last firearms we just purchased, I think they had a recall on them, so all of them were replaced just recently, so we don't need the firearms right now.
I'm sorry. There was a recall on our firearms,
Yes,
and therefore all firearms from the last time we had a replacement. Now all firearms need to be replaced every how many years? Through the chair.
it's through the chair. It's by the rounds that are shot through the gun. I think the standard is 50,000 rounds per firearm needs to be replaced. It's generally 3 to 5 years.
Okay. So all because of this recall, all these firearms have been replaced through the chair.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. Thank you. Through the chair, the project entitled Sheriff's Range Facility, it should be underway according to past CIPs, with $800,000 to be spent in 2011, last year's CIP. What's the status of this project?
Through the chair, I believe we have a remaining $400,000 in 2011 that still needs to be bonded for. So we don't have the complete funding for it yet.
Thank you. Through the chair, so we bonded for $400,000 of that.
Through the chair, we bonded for $800,000 in 2010. There's a remaining balance of $400,000 in 2011.
Thank you. Thank you. And the status of the project? Through the chair.
Through the chair, I believe we're just in the development, looking at the location of it is an issue now. We were originally going to put the range on top of the roof of the new PSB, but the PSB cannot support the range. So now we are looking at alternative locations, possibly the plaza level. So I believe DES is still looking at locations.
I'm sorry, I do have a question about that. You said that the range can't be located on top of the new public safety building, correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, wasn't this a major part of the new public safety building, was that we would have a range built into it so we could...
Through the chair, it was not something that's built. They're pods that are placed on top of the roof.
Okay, and these pods, the roof can't support it?
Through the chair, that's correct.
All right, thank you. Thank you. On page 70 of the project entitled, through the chair, excuse me, on page 70 of the project entitled Court Bureau Base Station Exterior Camera Replacement has been moved up, as you mentioned, in the but the project cost has doubled from $150,000 to be spent in 2014, according to last year's CIP, to $300,000 now to be spent in 2012. Could you clarify that for me through the chair?
Through the chair, the infrastructure also needs to be replaced. Therefore, there was an increase in costs. When it was originally planned out, we didn't think we need the infrastructure. We thought the infrastructure could support the systems, but it cannot. So we need to replace the infrastructure also.
Thank you. Let's see, on page 70, again through the chair, Project Marine Unit Vessel, scheduled 2010 in last year's CIP. Now the project appears scheduled in 2016. Has the project been pushed back, or is this the next scheduled replacement or equipment refresh for that?
Through the chair, it's the next scheduled replacement of another boat.
Okay, thank you. And finally, on page 70 again, the project entitled Marine Unit Office has been pushed back. Project cost increased from $250,000 planned in 2011, according to last year's CIP, to $350,000 being spent in 2012. Could you please clarify that?
Through the chair, I believe we got a better idea of how much the replacement of that office would be, and we're pushing it out again just because of funding issues.
All right, thank you very much.
Is there any other discussion? Legislator Beebe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In regards, and I believe Mr. Johnson had mentioned this, the reason for public safety being a lot less shown there was it was moved out. When you mentioned that through the chair, is that in regards to the new LDC that was started up last year?
Through the chair, that's correct, except for the one project, the integrated information system, which was an amendment to this year's capital program.
All right, thank you. So through the chair, would it be safe to say that this amount of money that was taken out of the CIP, which we've calculated around over $36 million, would this be also a big factor in the mandate to try to reduce the overall budget by 20%?
Through the chair, It did affect the public safety services amounts, but every other department came either achieved or came close to achieving their 20% reduction goal. So it worked into the overall number, but every department did manage a series of reductions.
All right, thank you. And through the chair, the items that have been taken out from last year's and moved over to the LDC, do we know what the status is? Are those going to be moving along at the same procedural that would normally happen if we were still overseeing these? Let me try to clarify it a little bit more. If you look at last year's and they're showing at what years these were projected to be accomplished or the amounts of money for each one, are they going to try to stay at that same schedule?
Mr. Chairman, I'd prefer to defer to Director Steve Bowman, who's not here at the committee today, but we can have those answers before Ways and Means for the members of the committee.
All right, that'd be fine. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, item carries. Next item.
Referral 10-154,
Moved
acceptance.
by Legislator McCann, seconded by Legislator Antelli. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, item carries.
Referral 10-155, acceptance of a
Moved
grant.
by Legislator Antelli, seconded by Legislator Yolovich. Is there any discussion? Legislator Draw.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So how would the decrease in our state funding, how's that going to be absorbed by the district attorney's office for that, for this program? Oh, I'm sorry. Through you, Mr. Chair. To the administration, so how is the decrease in the state funding for that that fraud protection program, how will that be absorbed by the district attorney's office?
Through the chair, the part of the decrease is a decrease in reimbursements we're receiving for regular expenditures that were budgeted under our general fund. They allowed us to pay for part of the salary of our the supervisor that supervises the entire program. So that was in our 9001 budget, but so now we're not really going to pay for that. And the other area was we were allowed to charge back for the investigator's automobile, and that, again, is also part of our general fund, but now we're not going to be able to charge that back. But those were not items that were created because of the grant in particular. The second area is that we've been told that most of this reduction is the second half of what would have been a 12-month program. The DCJS anticipates that we will be funded for a good share of that next year, but they didn't want to put that in the budget because they don't know what their budget's going to be at this point.
Okay, I understand. And the second part to my question, can I ask you, do we have a good success rate with this program? Through you,
Yes,
Mr. Chair.
Through the chair, we in 2003, before we had this program in place, and this is also a cooperative program with the Sheriff's Office and a number of the town police departments, so it's not just us. There are other agencies who receive funding under this. Monroe County experienced 4,461 motor vehicle thefts in 2003. In what is it? The latest figures I have are 2008. That number was 1,698, which is a 62% decrease. So it's had some impact in the fact that we've had a lot of it has been just the publicity of telling people, don't leave your keys in the car and lock your doors, and there is a theft problem. A lot of those people in the perception that there was a theft problem until their car gets stolen, obviously.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, item carries. Next item.
Referral 10-156.
Moved by Legislator Yolovich, seconded by Legislator Draw. Is there any discussion? Legislator Yolovich.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, maybe somebody can help me with the math here. I'm looking at the figures and they just don't jive. Supposedly, the reductions came from a 10% reduction for the Aid to Localities program. But 10% of 404,000 is not 44.9, and 10% of 283,000 is not 31.5. Can somebody explain to me if it was a 10% reduction, why is it a whole lot more of a reduction than you're stating here? Were there some other fees or whatever? I don't.
Through the chair, the budget for the program in the last grant cycle was $449,700. So it's 10% reduction from that amount.
From that amount?
From that amount, yes.
And I assume that the public defenders was a different figure also? Okay, thank you very much. It just didn't jive with what you had here.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, item carries.
Referral 10-157, acceptance of a
Moved by
grant.
Legislator Draw, seconded by Legislator McCann. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, item carries.
Referral 10-158, authorize a contract.
Moved by Legislator McCann, seconded by Legislator Antelli. Is there any discussion? Legislator Beebe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to get some clarification and some education on this appointment. The public administrator, is this, through the chair, is this a common appointment in all counties, or does it vary through?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is common in all the counties in New York State. However, each county uses a different model. The majority of counties use the chief fiscal officer as the public administrator, but there's half a dozen counties who use different models and allow attorneys at law to be appointed as the public administrator.
All right, thank you. And through the chair, can you give a brief description of the main duty or the main purpose of a public administrator?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair, the public administrator, as a public servant appointed by the surrogate court's main job is to represent or handle the estates of individuals who die intestate or die without a will. They also serve to handle cases in which there is a will, but there's either no executor named or there's no executor who's willing to serve, who's a member of the family. Also, the public administrator handles a variety of other duties for the surrogate court, handles acting as a guardian for individuals under the age of 18 who have accounts with the surrogate court, as well as investigates allegations of malfeasance related to estates.
All right, thank you. And through the chair, as the public administrator, is there a fee base involved with these estates? I know probably some estates they don't have anything, or some may be significant. What does the public administrator, I guess, what does he collect from being in charge of these?
There is, through you, Mr. Chair, there is an attorney fee structure that if the public administrator is an attorney at law, he can act, or she rather, can act as the attorney for the estate and then be compensated through a fee schedule set by the surrogate court for the attorney work.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, so the fee setup is done by the courts, not at the leisure of the attorney?
That is correct, to the chair.
All right, thank you. One of the things in researching this position, I found that the original, going back a few years, 1993, this to run the office expenses was only $12,500, and then later on, it was increased in the year 2000 to $48,000. And today, we're looking at increasing it again to 100,000. Quite a increase in the 2 times that I've mentioned here. Through the chair, can anybody explain exactly what that $100,000 is going to be doing? Is it part of the public administrator's fee? I know it says office expenses too, but maybe a little bit better clarification. I'd like to have that if I could.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair, the amount not to exceed $100,000 in this instance represents the paralegal, the salary rather of 2 paralegals, as well as an office expense amount. The state law allows that the county may allow the public administrator a reasonable amount for the operation of the office. Since 2000, this body has paid for the expense of 1 paralegal. Since 2005, approximately a 2nd paralegal has been dedicated full-time to doing the work in the public administrator's office. So that is why there's the change from the previous contract.
All right, thank you. And through the chair, the particular reason for this increase, you mentioned that you're adding on another paralegal. Could you give us a bit of information in regards to the last 10 years and how many cases or estates have been handled? Is it because there's a huge increase here, or what's causing this amount to go up and add an additional staff member?
Through you, Mr. Chair, in terms of the changes in the work of the public administrator over the last decade, the public administrator's role has expanded a great deal in terms of the work that the court sends to the public administrator. As I mentioned earlier, the court appointing the public administrator to investigate allegations of malfeasance related to an estate, which could include auditing attorneys' work to verify fees, as well as investigating the wrongdoing by a party in an estate. And as you pointed out earlier, this is the type of work for which there's no fees generated. Obviously, if there's been malfeasance and the money's gone, there can be no attorney's fees for the work. Also, the court has been using the public administrator more as a guardian, as I stated earlier, for people under the age of 18 that have accounts, with the surrogate court. So there's been an increase in terms of that type of work with the office, as well as increased efficiency in the office. Obviously, it's very important to process these estates quickly, because you're not just dealing with handling the assets, you're also dealing with the burial of individuals, and that's something that the public administrator is heavily involved in. When a person dies intestated without family, they would have to handle that process. And the 2nd paralegal is used to cover that work, make sure that the office is covered when the other one's on vacation, sick time, all those different things. So having the 2nd paralegal increases the efficiency of the office.
All right, thank you. And through the chair, so I would assume here at this point, the increase from 48,000 to 100,000, most of that's going to be for the salary of the 2nd paralegal?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. The general amount for office expenses will stay flat at the 12,000, which it was back in at the last referral, and this will cover the cost of the 2nd paralegal.
All right, thank you. I have a couple more questions. Just bear with me, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair, could you give us, I mentioned about the 10-year period and what may have caused the increase, but can you give us an example of the last 2 years, maybe perhaps, of how much was collected in the estates for a calendar year that the public administrator took care of?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have that specific information. I can provide to you for the amount of commissions that were returned to the county over the last decade. For any estate in which the public administrator serves as the administrator, a 5% commission does return to the county. And over the last decade, that's averaged a little over $100,000. So ultimately, if the amount does equal the $100,000, it should be a cost-neutral contract.
All right, thank you. And through the chair, 5% comes back to the county. Does the public administrator, the person there in that position, does he collect a fee as well, or is it like you said earlier, if he's an attorney, that's how he collects his fee.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in this context, the attorney work is compensated by fee. But as far as the work of the public administrator, in Monroe County, that's not a salaried position. Rather, in Monroe County, the attorney is paid, and then the legislature compensates for the operation of the office through this contract.
All right, thank you. And one last question or request, if I could, through the chair. Could we get a copy of the the current contract of the public administrator?
Through the chair, certainly.
All right, thank you very much for giving me all that information. I appreciate it. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Item carries. No other new business. Next item on the agenda is other matters. Are there any other matters to come before the committee? Seeing none. The May 24, 2010 meeting of the Public Safety Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of the Public Safety Committee is scheduled for June 28, 2010 at 5 p.m.